Good morning to our class on innovations in mobile home weatherization. My name is Cal Steiner. Uh, I've been in weatherization for roughly 40 years, and we've been doing mobile homes for just about 30 years or so. What we're going to do today is go through new innovations that have come out through the field that seem to make this job a little bit easier and and faster and more cost effective. We'll get into the cost effectiveness a little bit later, but these new procedures, techniques, and materials, tools, and measures will all make it easier for you in the field to do this as easily as possible and as quickly as possible, and once again, end up with a higher SIR. Okay, let's get started on the main content of this presentation. And before we get going too far, I just want to make the comment that, I'm sitting in front of a computer now looking at a speaker, and it's just not the same as being in front of a live audience. So you're going to have to bear with me. I may make some mistakes, if you, hopefully it be nothing too bad. But anyway, just realize that this is the first time we've ever done this, and it's quite a bit more difficult than standing in front of the group. So, what I want to talk about now is the 7 basic steps to mobile home weatherization. We want to simplify this to some degree, and I want to talk about each one of these a little bit in detail. Number one, it has to start out with a complete, accurate audit. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you have to input information that is correct, or as correct as we can get. Uh, Several of the things that we find that are not correct in an audit is the beginning R value. Many times people take the thickness of insulation and give it the R value that it would normally have if you're just looking at that insulation. However, anytime you have air that can penetrate the insulation, or the insulation does not cover all 6 sides of the cavity, you have to downgrade that uh, R value to a more appropriate and honest R value in walls, attics, and bellies, depending on how much air there's accessing into that cavity, and also how well it's installed. But all that's a whole different session, but just be aware of that. The other big thing we find is that the labor costs seem to be quite high. And when they input them for the first time on many of the audits, uh, we want to input a labor time that is reasonable, that an experienced crew would want to achieve. That way you'll get an SIR that will allow you to do these measures. The second one, we're going to start the actual uh, procedure by accessing the cavity, whether it's the attic, walls, or belly. And basically, what we want to do is cut a hole, open it up, do something to access that cavity. Okay, and there's many different ways. These are all different sessions, but uh, first we access that cavity. Uh, the third thing is we want to install the insulation in a cost-effective and efficient manner. What that means is that we want to do it in a time frame that is reasonable. When we first started out on walls, it took us 2 days to do walls. Well, now we have it down to 4 hours maybe. Uh, the second one, cost-effective or the efficient manner, is we want to put in as much insulation as possible to get the best SIR available to us. And that comes down to inputting it into about 1.5 pounds per cubic foot. 1.6 is the actual uh, amount. But we want to put that in at a density of 1.6 pounds, and that gives us an R value of about 4 per inch. Okay, so we need an accurate bag count. So that goes back to that complete and accurate audit. Once again, that's a whole new session. How do you input that stuff? Uh, so you're going to want to get a little further guidance on that. Now, once we're done inputting that insulation, we need to seal that access point so it doesn't leak air, it doesn't leak water, and it looks decent. And the fifth thing is we always want to leave the home in a safe manner, in an effective and efficient manner, so we do our diagnostics and make sure they're all in line. And this is done after everything else is performed. Uh, Number 6, we do an inspection. The inspector, the QCI, should go out and take a look at things and actually look at the cavities, look at the bag counts that were documented, and make sure they align with the bag counts that were reflected in the audit. Uh, he should also go and cut in certain areas of the belly or pull apart a wall and take a look or the attic and make sure that the right amount of insulation was put in an efficient manner. Now, after that's done, this should not be an I gotcha inspection. It should be, this is what I found, this is what we need to do to correct it, and then help them correct that situation. Uh, the last thing is motivation. What I found, unless crews are motivated to do this properly, it's a tough sell. So as supervisors, you need to go out and actually motivate them in a positive manner to do what they need to do on a regular basis. As you all know, this is a dirty, hard project when it comes to mobile homes, but it's very self-fulfilling when you do it right, and the clients get a lot out of it. Okay, let's talk for a second about what do we input into our audit program, whether it's MIA or any of your personal programs that you have out there. First of all, any cavity that is not full, you should be inputting correct information into the audit about that cavity. So if you don't have insulation touching all 6 sides of the cavity, input uh, input that information into your audit, and you let the audit decide whether you do it. If the SIR is not achieved, don't do it. But if the SIR is above whatever your state recommends, then you are required to do that measure. A correct audit has to include correct R values and especially your beginning R value, which is very important to coming out with an accurate SIR. Generally speaking, if the cavity is not full, your R value, your apparent R value that you see, let's say you look in and you say there's an R value there of an R7 because it's 2 inches. We deduct, I shouldn't say deduct, we adjust it to a more correct R value by reducing it by 25%. And this is the minimum. If it's installed very poorly and very skimpy insulation, the audit will allow you to deduct actually more than 25%. This will give you a more accurate beginning R value. This is probably one of the main reasons R values are not installed correctly into these programs, is they don't adjust for insulation that is not properly put in or has not filled the cavity continuously. Another item I just want to stress again is labor costs. So labor costs have to be labor costs of an experienced crew, not as a beginning crew. If you put it in as a beginning crew, you just won't get very many SIRs. Gauging your machine. One of the things I've found is you want to set your machine so that it will produce or give you a certain density uh, in as fast a time as possible. So I'm going to go through a little bit on that. But even before you start, check all your connections, your reducers, and your hose. And you always want to use the largest hose or pipe possible when you fill a cavity and adjust your machine to match that. And the reason we do that, if you can fit a inch and a half tube up a wall instead of an inch and a quarter, you're going to get done in considerably sooner time. And that's the object of this slide, is to run as much material through your hose as possible and still achieve the density, which translates into a R value, as possible. So how do we do that? First of all, we start out and we will work with both the feed and the air. Okay, we adjust the feed for efficiency. In other words, the more we open the gate, the more material flows throughout. We adjust the air to set our density, which affects our R value. Now, as I said in that last slide, the density we want is about 1.6 pounds per cubic foot, and that will give us an R value of roughly 4 per inch. So we play with that air so that the air packs the insulation. We, in most cases, do not want to take that pipe or the hose and jam it in and out, because we can't control that density as much. However, if we set the air correctly, the insulation will start slowing down and stop at the right density, and then you just pull your tube down. All right. So once we get going on that, now we have to adjust our feed to run as much material through there as possible so that we don't plug up. And here again, this is it's going to take a week or two to set all your adjustments on your machine. Once you do, you write it down somewhere, such as when you're insulating walls with a inch and a quarter tube and you're using fiberglass insulation, you write down the reading on your pressure, on your blower pressure, and also the slide gate, how many holes you have. And so next time you go back and use that same hose for the same technique, you just clean out your hopper and set your machine, and you know you will at that point get the density that you want in the least amount of time possible. Out in the field, I've seen many different types of rigid pipe used to install insulation in the attic walls and belly. I just want to touch on a few of them. PVC we definitely don't want to use, as it has a tendency to give us some pretty good shocks. ABS Schedule 40 pipe is one of the ones we use the most, and you can get it in inch and a half and 2 inches, and I would suggest getting them in both of those sizes, diameters. There's some cases where you will need a narrower pipe, uh, but once again, you always want to use the largest diameter possible for whatever technique you're using. A gray electrical pipe, that works. It's a little bit heavier and doesn't probably flex as much as the ABS Schedule 40, but it's usable. Copper, and then muffler exhaust and aluminum would be the metal ones that you could use. Uh, they're a little bit expensive and also heavier. I don't care for them quite as much because they don't flex when you have that ABS plastic in a cavity. It will bend around pipes. It'll bend over scab pieces. They're just a little bit more flexible. Uh, uh, then, when we talk about our flexible tubes, there's many different kinds out there. You basically find the one that you really enjoy and works for you. Uh, but you should once again have an inch and a half tube along with the inch and a quarter interior diameter tube. Uh, One of the problems I've seen that are caused by these is when people hang them rather than put them in and store them in a straight manner. Once you start hanging those tubes and they develop a little crinkle in there, that's just a plug up point. So make sure you store those tubes. We use a PVC or you just build a long box, but you shove it in there and you keep it straight and wrinkle free. Listed below are some of the sizes that we recommend having, but really it's not necessary to have all those sizes. The rigid pipes, inch and a half and the 2 inch would suffice, but um, these are what's available in whatever type of pipe that you select. Hoses, you for sure should have the inch and a quarter and 1.5 inch. And once again, I can't stress this enough. You always want to use the pipe or hose with the largest diameter that will get the job done, that you'll be able to fit into the cavity. And just be aware there are summer and winter weights of hoses. In other words, a hose that you could use in the winter time, you would not be able to use in the summer because it'd be too soft. And some of the summer hoses you wouldn't be able to use in the winter because they'd be so stiff you couldn't hardly bend them. Um, there are three different types of hoses I've seen. You have that clear plastic, and then you have the one that has a mesh in it, kind of a cloth mesh, and then vacuum hoses that resist collapsing when they're underneath a vacuum. Uh, Now you also want to look at different lengths. You don't want to have a 20-foot hose or 20-foot pipe. So most mobile homes you can get by with a 15-foot pipe, and we want that to be one section. We don't want a joint in there because that's just a hang up point. So make sure you find one with the ABS plastic. You can get them in 20 footers and cut them down to whatever length you want. Here is an example of what I mean by storing the tubes in a straight manner. Build something, or like I said before, use PVC. Uh, to the right there, you'll see once you get a tube with that crinkle or that bend in it, cut it off just above that and use it again, or throw it away. Once you get that in there, that will cause you more problems and plug ups than it's worth. And price of these hoses are not expensive. Here's another couple slides just showing the amount of hoses that we have, different lengths, different widths, different thicknesses, and how we store them. And obviously the picture on the right, we don't use brooms on all of them, but you can take some stiff piece of copper or conduit or something and insert it into the hose to keep that straight. This is really important to maintain these hoses without kinks. Yeah. Those kinks are the major problem when you get plugs in your in your whole assembly line due to just one kink in your supply hose. What I'm going to talk about here is probably one of the biggest reasons why it takes so long to do mobile home walls or attics or anything, any measure that you're using an inch and a quarter hose with. If you look on the first slide there, the reducer is stuck inside the hose. Now, what that actually did right there was it reduced the area inside the hose by about 37% just by inserting it in, because we went from an interior diameter of 1¼ inches down to 1 inch. The proper way to do this is to split your hose, as the next couple slides show, and slide it over the reducer. You should never have um, a connection where the diameter is less than what it is going into, as in that first slide. This really hurts the amount of production, the time of production, and is one of the major causes of blockages. Okay, talking about using pipes when we insulate attics. If you have a 15-foot pipe and you start pulling it out, that gets to be a lot of weight hanging on the end of it. Two different cures for that. One is you can take an inch-and-a-half interior diameter plastic tube, as you see on the left there, and many of them are stiff enough and if you store them straight, you can push that all the way across. Of course, it has to be cut at a 45-degree angle on the front so you can move it around so it slides over the insulation instead of grabbing it. The second way is using scaffolding. If you just take a piece of pipe, ABS plastic or whatever, and attach it to your scaffolding at roof edge height, and then it just rests on that as you pull it out. Here we're going to talk about how to measure the attic to get the right amount of bag count. Of course, we need the length and the width and the amount of insulation, but a couple other measurements that are very important are the height at the center of the roof and the heel plate. Let's talk about the height at the center. What we like to do is take a 4-inch hole saw and cut a hole near the center of the mobile home, and do it in a closet or somewhere where it's inconspicuous. Um, so once you have that done, you can reach up in there and measure from the roof down to the ceiling and record that height. And also, at that time, you want to get up and grab a piece of insulation and for the thickness of the insulation that you'll need to input into a program that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But the other place that we have not been getting is the heel plate height. The heel plate can be anywhere from an inch and a half laid flatwise all the way up to a 2x6 on end. So you can see there's going to be quite a bit more volume in that attic with a 2x6 or a 2x4 heel plate than there is with a inch-and-a-half one. So we need to get that measurement. And the way we do that is we take a very stiff wire, or these insulation support wires, and right next to the heel plate, we push it up through the ceiling until it hits the roof. And then we mark that area where the insulation hanger meets the ceiling. Pull it out and subtract off the thickness of the ceiling, okay? And that'll give you the height at the center, or pardon me, at the edge of the roof. Which now, when we input that into a program, it'll give us the appropriate bag count to get a density of 1.6 pounds per cubic foot and an R value of 4. That program can be gotten by contacting myself or Bruce Hagen at the North Dakota State Agency level, or the state level. And he has that program. It'll lead you through it. It's a very simple program. You input this information and it will give you a bag count plus the pre-R value and the post-R value that you should be inputting into your program. All right, in that last slide, I mentioned that that bag count, if you input the correct information into that program, is going to give you a bag count based on insulating that attic at a density of 1.6 pounds per cubic foot, which will give you an R value of 4 per inch. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the answer is the audit tells you how many bags you have to install in that attic to reach that 1.6 pounds per cubic foot. Now it's up to the crew to use their techniques to install all the bags or close to all the bags. Normally you don't hit it right on the nose, but if you're within one or two, that's plenty good. So how do you do that? First, divide the mobile home in half and then in half again, so you have 1/4 of the mobile home. The crew should start insulating that attic until they reach about 1/4 of the mobile home. When they get that far, shut it down, go out and ask how many bags have I used. If let's say it's a 20 bag attic, and if you used 8, you know that you should have only used 5 bags. So that means your pressure is too high. You're dense packing too much. So you have to reduce the pressure and maybe increase the feed a little bit. Now, if you went back and let's say you only had 3 bags in, that means you need to up the pressure a little bit and dense pack it a little bit more. Now, once again, we don't want to be jamming that pipe in and out. We want the machine settings, the pressure settings, to let us know when we're hitting this density. And I talked a little bit about that before engaging the machines. That's what's so important about it. We don't want to physically, manually dense pack. We want the machine to do it. And when the machine hits that 1.6 pounds, it'll slow down or quit, and then it's time to move the pipe. And you get those settings by trial and error and just keep working with it. Then you do the next section. And once again, once you're done with 1/4, you go find out how many bags you used. And if it's above, then you have to adjust a little less pressure and that again. And you keep doing that until you get the right settings on your machine so that your machine is actually doing the dense packing for you and you are not. If you have problems with this, I'll leave some information at the end of this on how you can get a hold of me, and don't be afraid to give me a call anytime you're struggling in the field. With that, that's how it's done. It takes a little time to gauge those machines to get that density. Right here we're showing a procedure where you can easily insulate a cathedral ceiling from one side. This is where that ABS plastic pipe comes in. Uh, if you can take the 2-inch pipe and get it to go up and over and down the other side, use the 2-inch. But we found the 1.5 is much easier, bends a little bit easier. It's going to take you a little bit longer to do the job, but you'll be able to do it. The trick to this is the front of that pipe has to be cut at a 45. So once you get it to the other side, you can pass the center line, you can turn it, and it's able to slide down until you hit the other heel plate. In this slide, we want to address strong back procedures, how we work around them, and also what is a strong back. A strong back is nothing more than a 1x4, 1x6, or 2x4, 2x6 in the center of the attic, which gives it support over a living room or kitchen area. Uh, we don't always find them, but once in a while they are in there. And what it stops us from doing is accessing from one side and being able to hit the entire cavity. The slide to the right shows the way we used to address it by drilling a hole in each cavity and filling up that side of the strong back. The next slide we will talk about how we access them now. Here we are looking at a strong back, and normally we would not be able to get a full pipe across that strong back to insulate the other side. However, with this ABS plastic, if you which is shown on the right, if you have that cut at a 45-degree angle like that, you can stick that into the crack of the strong back and twist it in there, and it will actually go over that strong back and down the other side. We are able to do it with an 1.5 inch tube, which is a little bit easier, but you can also do it with a 2-inch hose or pipe. Once again, you want to use the pipe that has the largest diameter so you can push more insulation in less time. Once again, you use that 45-degree angle to kind of weasel in there and twist it back and forth, and you'll be able to pop it over to the other side and fill it naturally. As in the past, we used to have to drill 2 holes. Now we can do it all from one side. Here I'm showing 2 types of roofs with basically a pitched ceiling, where we are not going to fill the entire ceiling up or the attic up with insulation, but rather we're going to basically treat it like a site-built home and put as much as we can at the edge, dense pack it at the edge, and then layer it to whatever R value your state requires in the center. The one on the left, you can see there is a ridge plate there, and that's just been unscrewed and taken off, and we use a pipe to stick it in and insulate it. Very easy to do. The one to the right is a little bit different type of a roof. It doesn't have a ridge plate on it, and so right there we cut a hole in and take our pipe and insulate down by the edge and dense pack there, and then insulate the entire cavity. And then we would patch that with a good patching method using polyurethane caulk and a good procedure to make sure that it doesn't leak. Here we have a regular pitched roof with shingles. There we can just remove a vent and have somebody crawl in and insulate it, or we can add a vent and have somebody crawl in, or just go in partial ways and insulate as much as you can with a good stiff tube, and you can add a few more vents if you need. In the old days, we used to use a 2.5 inch hole to access the cavity either through the roof or through the attic. This made it a little bit tougher to move that hose around, and it damaged the hole around the interior when we went through the interior. So we've expanded that out to a 3-inch one. It just makes it easier to do, and we do a better job of it with less damage to the hole. And that's whether you're going in from the top or the bottom using a flexible hose. The slide on the left shows a manner or one of the ways where we catch the debris when you drill up through uh, the ceiling to access that hole. You can use just about anything to that looks like that, a box, a plastic bucket, just cut it down to size. One of the things there also is that pilot bit. You only want that to be as thick as or extend out as thick as your ceiling is. That way you don't risk hitting a wire with it when you go through. If you have to go up on top of a roof to access the cavity and drill holes and do your insulating from on top, or if you just have to go up and make some patches, you have to remove the existing covering that's up on that roof, or your patch will not stick. In the old days, we used to take a weed burner and stick a little bit of heat to it, and then take a scraper and scrape it clean. That obviously wasn't the best way to do things. You really had to be careful because that produced a lot of heat. Now the way we do it is we take a good metal wire brush and get a very aggressive one, very tough. The one shown is not a very big one, but I would get a larger one than that, and and get one that is quite tough and not very flexible, and then put it on a good drill, and you can scrape off most of the stuff. Here we're going to talk a little bit about insulating from the inside, and don't be afraid to insulate from the inside. Once you get the technique down, there should not be a mess or anything. So this is a great way of doing it. If you look at these pictures, the one in the center, uh, you can take a chalk line and run it down so you get a nice straight line. And then you drill your holes, insulate through them, and then we take a piece of decorative covering, and you can go into a lumber yard and let the homeowner pick it out if you want. Generally a 1x4 somewhere in there is what they can pick out. But pick something out to match the home decor, and then you just install that up on the ceiling as you see in that first photo. So it's a simple technique. Insert that hose, and there is a technique to doing that, which we don't have time to get into now of all the techniques, but it can be done. You have to work the hose over to the corner and then insulate back. In the first slide I mentioned, in one of the 7 steps was to gain access to a cavity. Sometimes on these attic, you right above the metal wall, there's a space. If you just lift that fascia piece, uh, it looks right into the attic. This doesn't happen very often, but if you see that extend down quite a ways, uh, pop a few screws, look up in there. It can be a very easy way to insulate that attic. Here's probably one of the neatest little tools I've found in quite a while, and a fellow Brandon from Fargo came up with this one. But it's called a Pookie Buster. And if you look at it, it has those little ridges on it, the little teeth. And what it's good for, if you have screws like in the first picture, that are covered up by tar or sealants or mastic or whatever. If you take that Pookie Buster and get in and get on that screw, it'll back it out in an instant. Uh, we used to have to fight taking the tar off or the sealant off, and then taking a hex head and backing it off. This Pookie Buster does a tremendous job. They're a little spendy, but in the long run, they'll sure save you a lot of time. Just go online and Google Pookie Buster and pick yourself up a pair and make things a little bit easier on your life. What I want to talk about here is what we go over our patches with when we use peel and seal on the roof. Number one, anytime we use that product called peel and seal, we want to make sure that the metal is awfully clean, or else that peel and seal won't stick to it. But once we put the peel and seal down over a patch, we want to cover the patch with it. And uh, the things we want to use is something like Rapid Roof, GSL ProFlex, or through the roof or a high-grade urethane adhesive. And the object here is to make sure you hit that edge of that peel and seal patch to make sure that the weather does not work on it and loosen it up. Once again, whatever we use up there, it has to be a very high-grade product. This is no place to use cheap materials on the roof. Let's discuss for a minute disconnects in the bathroom fans that go up into the attic and supposedly through the roof. Once in a while, these fans they're not connected all the way out, so that when you take a shower, you turn the fan on and it just pumps an immense amount of water up into that attic, and it condenses on the roof, and then comes down and soaks up your insulation, as you can see on the right hand side. So we want to be able to test for that. And the way we test for it is stick one of your hoses from your pressure diagnostic tool, whichever one you're using, up into the attic, and then turn on that blower fan. When you do that, the pressure in the attic should not go up. It should not be pressurized. If it is pressurized, that means you have a disconnect between your fan and the roof, which will result in an immense amount of water precipitating out into the attic.
In the room, and then we drill a 3-inch hole. We drill run and then stick the hose up there, see how open it is. If you can get to everything okay, then you know how far to drill your hole. For every hole, we kind of blow in 4 directions.
Okay.
And we dense pack it, so you just fill it all the way up.
So what kind of R value do you end up getting? You guesstimate?
Like this is 9 inches thick. I think it's like 26.4.
Okay. So how many holes do you think you have to cut throughout this?
This one's pretty open, so I'll probably go 2 more in this room.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a dividing board going down the middle, so we gotta run 2 sets of holes. Sometimes each joist is blocked off, so you gotta drill each one.
Okay.
And down the trailer. Left a little bit in. Thank you.
So with this small room, you probably just need one hole.
Yeah, but since there's stuff out there, couch and stuff in the way of the TV, I'm gonna put one here and then one over here so we can get out there as far as we can.
Okay.
So instead of what we usually do, we would scrape down the roof coating and do a line all the way along there, and the second line all the way along there, because this is a double wide, so there's blocks in between. We decided instead that would be a lot quicker to just take off this roof cap, because we can get off super easy, and then we're just drilling 3-inch holes that are going to be covered with the roof cap anyways, and it's just going to be a lot quicker and easier than having to scrape that down and then put on peel and seal and the cap and the
The measure I see that is mostly not being done on mobile homes is insulating the walls. There's two ways we do it. One is by stuffing an existing bat all the way up the wall, and the other is just using a tube to access the wall and blow it. This has become one of the easiest measures we do. Once you learn a few simple tricks of how to get that tube up the wall without plugging it, and how to get around belt rails, which are simple techniques. But the other problems that we see is they generally blow out walls or they puff out the siding. Both of those can be controlled quite easily by gauging your machine and turning down the pressures, turning down the blower. And in doing so, you might have to adjust your feed also so you don't plug up the tubes. But working between those two, you should be able to get this that wall done in a fair amount of time. It should not take a whole day to do a mobile home wall. Once you get the pressure set and the feed gate set, so you don't blow out a wall, you don't puff out the siding, but you're running as much material through as possible. Uh, there's a lot of agencies that are having a lot of success with this, and I really don't see any reason why we are not doing more of it. This picture just shows a tube going up on the interior side of the insulation, and the siding on this one is horizontal siding, which makes it easier. You can just roll a piece of it up and you can really get good access to that wall cavity. This is the type of a wall that we suggest you start out on to get some good experiences with it, rather than the vertical siding that goes all the way down past the rim joist, which is a little bit harder to access, but still very easy. Once again, access is the main issue in insulating walls or anything. How do you gain access to that cavity? Uh, there are times when you can go from the top of the wall to insulate that wall cavity. And these pictures just show a couple ways that we've done it. The first one to the left is we just pull back a trim piece and we were able to insulate down that wall without removing a screw. The middle picture is there's an actual piece of metal about a foot wide that went across this one. We removed a few screws and stuck the hose down, and we were able to insulate that home that way. The reason we even tried that is there's a shed that's right up next to it, and we were trying to figure out a way to insulate it. And once again, just find an access point and we're going that way. The third picture shows there's a fascia piece, that brown piece. Uh, we just removed that and we drilled a hole through the siding. And the reason we did that is there's a deck there. And so we were not able to insulate up it, so we decided to remove that fascia piece, drill a hole, and insulate down. Once again, sometimes you just have to sit back and figure out, how am I going to access that cavity? Right here is another method of accessing the walls. We just ran a chalk line about a foot up. You can run it 2 feet up, 3 feet up, whatever you want, and take a nipper tool, and we cut off that bottom piece of the siding, and then we're able to gain access to that wall. And then to seal it up, we just take some Z channel and put it up behind the upper siding and extend over the bottom siding, so we don't have any leaks then, and it looks very nice. Some mobile homes are even built with that piece in it. So if we put that in there and we assure that it's not going to leak, it makes a great way to insulate that wall. We also use that technique when we're at a deck and we can't get underneath it and go up from the bottom. The question always comes up, do we insulate above the doors and above windows? Normally, people do not. In the old days, if you take a look at that left picture, that's the way we used to do it, drill and plug it. It doesn't look very good. But anyway, we decided not to do them because they were sealed on all uh, on the top and the bottom, and we didn't have air movement in those cavities, and it was a relatively small area. However, now if a person wants to, a little bit better way of doing it would be go to the inside and drill a 1/4 of an inch hole in several areas and take your 2-part foam, stick it in and give it a couple short blasts, and then hold it with your hand to make sure that it does not pop the paneling on the inside. It's a quick, easy way to get those spots that you can't get from the outside. This would also work if you had a complete block and you couldn't get up into a cavity somewhere. Go on the inside, drill some holes right in that black line on the paneling, and when you're done, just take a little bit of a dark brown marker and go over it, and they'll never know you were there. Here's a couple pictures of insulating wall cavities. The picture on the left shows when we stick the tube up there, we take a piece of bat and we surround the tube so that insulation doesn't fall down on the ground, and it works quite well. And in that technique, we actually fill the bottom of the cavity up with the tube with blow-in insulation. If you look on the right hand side, there's that yellow square is where we would cut a 1-foot piece of insulation, stick it around the tube underneath the existing insulation, and in doing that, we're able to stop blowing a foot from the bottom, which creates much less mess and actually does a very nice job of sealing up that bottom. So all you gotta do is cut a foot or a 16-inch, surround the hose uh, next to the interior wall, start blowing, and you have your tube marked off so that when you pull that tube out, when it hits that line where the end of your tube is about a foot from the bottom, you can shut your blower off.
Because of where I figure the floor is at here, and then I look, make sure there's no wall, windows, no electrical boxes. Everything looks good at a certain height, so I just kept it right at 6 inches.
Okay.
Then we snap a line, we come along, we find out where the studs are, we go in between, drill a hole.
So right there, you're just feeling for the stud.
Yeah, right now I'm just filling for the stud. Okay, right here is the wire I'm talking about. You don't know, it must be an outlet in there somewhere, but it runs along, loops. That's why I don't push hard, so I know I don't hook that wire. So here it's going up, coming down and backing up.
Okay.
And while I'm doing this, I'm kind of watching the wall, watching how it moves, if it's starting to bow out, listening for sounds, just in case you find yourself in an accident where it blows the wall out on the inside. So
Okay.
you're kind of just watching a little bit of everything, making sure, as well as keeping your timing while filling up the wall so you don't fill up too much of one spot versus another.
Here are a couple pictures of quite large holes underneath a mobile home that need to be patched before we can attempt to insulate it. There's a couple new techniques that we use that make this patching job a little bit easier and actually performs a lot better than the old method of just stitch stapling it. I'll address that in the next slide. This technique of patching large holes underneath the belly involves just a screw gun, a staple gun, some house wrap or whatever type of material you want to use underneath to patch your belly, and some 1x2s. Just figure out how wide the hole is and cut your belly patching material maybe a couple feet wider than that hole. Then you want to attach one end with some staples to a 1x2 and then roll up the the patching material on that 1x2 until you get to the other side, and then attach another 1x2. You go underneath, you screw the 1x2 into the floor joist, and then you unroll the assembly over to the other side, and then screw in the 1x2 to the other side of the belly, right next to the I-beams. Now you want to pull that good and tight, and then pull up on it so it's really nice and tight, and then put the screws in it. That way you have a nice secure patch down there. This works very well for large holes, and it can be made up to 9 feet long using a 1x2 8-foot long. So the width can be quite wide, so you can attach it to a pretty large hole. The two pictures shown with insulation in it along the rim joist show two problems that we encounter in rim joists. As far as the insulation does not cover that rim joist, and so we have a thermal bypass there. The one on the left, you can see there is about 6 inches of a 2x8 that is not insulated. The one on the right with the yellow insulation, the insulation was not put up close to the rim joist, which in that case, in either case, the insulation is not doing any good whatsoever as far as insulating that rim joist. So one of the techniques we've used is we can go up into that rim joist, just cut a hole from underneath and stick a hose up there and dense pack the first couple feet of that past settled density, which is about 1.6 pounds per cubic foot, but dense pack it real good so that rim joist is covered. Now, normally if we see something like that, we just go ahead and do it. The math to it is pretty tricky. But if you do insulate that, all of a sudden the existing insulation in the belly and everything performs better because we don't have that thermal bypass at that rim joist. One of the problems we find when we do insulate the belly, if we insulate the cavity where the water lines go up into a sink or a bathroom or a shower, we can isolate the water lines and cause so the heat doesn't get down to keep them thawed out. The other problem is if you look at that picture, I have those two black circles which would represent where the water lines come up, and we don't have insulation against that sill plate, so that's going to be a freezing spot. On the next slide, I'm going to show you how we address that. We actually just put insulation behind those water lines next to the sill plate or the rim joist, and then we fold it underneath the water lines where the water lines come into that cavity. And in that way, we don't have to insulate that cavity. We want to stay away from it when we blow the belly. Okay, right here we see a couple pictures before and after. On the picture on the right, you can see the after effect, but before, you can take a look and see what it looked like. The water lines were going up and they were freezing because they're too close to the rim joist and they aren't insulated. So if you suspect that, or the client says they're having freezing problems, or if you just want to do it on every home that you insulate the belly, there's nothing wrong with that. Just go down, open up the cavity where the water line is, and you want to take some poly encased fiberglass insulation, R19 would be preferred, stick it up against the rim joist, and then push it back into the wing as far as you can, a couple feet. Okay, now once you secure the belly material, that should be insulated so that the water line will not freeze during the winter time. Now you don't want to blow that cavity. You should mark them so that when you get to that area, you don't go in there and insulate over those water lines, because we want a little bit of heat to come down and keep them thawed out. Generally speaking, there are two methods of insulating a belly. One is from underneath, and the other is from the rim joist, drilling through the rim joist. Some fellows down in Colorado developed this technique. You can see on the left, there's a metal pipe being put up right above the I-beam. Now we've improved on that a little bit. We use our ABS plastic pipe for that, because we'll be able to stick that up into the belly and it will ride all the way across. What we want to do is just make a slit just before the I-beam, take that plastic ABS pipe and push it up into the cavity, and it will go all the way across to the other edge. Once we hit that edge, we insulate out as we would normally, and when we're done, we take a hose and we fill in the wing by the side where we inserted the pipe. The one downside to this is you do have to take the skirting off on the one side, but it's a very non-invasive way of insulating a belly, and especially if you have siding that's easy to take off on one side. One of the complaints we usually get is people get shocked when they're using their insulation machine. Here's some of the solutions that we found helps. Once in a while you just can't get rid of it, and I'm not sure why, but here's a few of the things that help. Number one, is your insulation machine grounded? You know, that should be somehow grounded, and we've seen that work once in a while. What type of pipe are you using? If you're using a PVC pipe, you're going to get shocked, sometimes quite severely. Even if you have an ABS pipe, you'll get less of it, but you'll still see the hair on your arms rising, which is normal. If you touch the mobile home while you are insulating, that will relieve the static pressure through the mobile home. That works quite well. About the worst thing you can do is feel the hair on your arms come up and then touch the mobile home, because that will relieve the shock. As a last resort, you can install grounding wire from a metal connector near your rigid pipe. Just put a screw into it and put a grounding wire from that into a copper peg of some sort, and that will a lot of times relieve the static pressure that builds up.
So can you tell when it's full?
Yeah.
It just slows down, or?
Yeah, it slows down or it stops.
Okay.
So I did too. The first couple of joists on the very front
Yeah,
and on the very back, I have to dense pack the whole way.
yeah.
So that time I stuck it in all the way and I just let it fill till it was full. But now for the rest of it, I'm not supposed to dense pack in the center or else the pipes will freeze.
Okay.
So I gotta shove it in and just give it like a loose pack that I pull out. But this part's gotta be dense pack, and you can hear it because I'll like slow down and kind of like stop, and when it starts to stop you gotta pull it up quick, and then it's full. Or else if you let it go too long when it stops, it'll plug.
Okay.
let's spend a little bit of time on the correct way to seal up ductwork to make sure that it lasts. Uh, as you all know, we're going to be the last people that ever seal ductwork, and so we want to make sure we do a good job so it'll last a lifetime. So going down that list, number one, repair any places that can be repaired with screws or where it's coming away from the floor, nails or whatever. Uh, Now, before we put anything else on, what we want to do is clean the metal surface and clean it well with a good rag. And we like to use acetone. Acetone seems to work the best, removing gooey stuff and oily stuff. But once you use a lot of acetone, scrub it hard. The mastic or the tape or mesh that you use is only going to stick as well as what's on the metal at that time. So we want to make sure that it's good and clean. Now, then you're going to probably, if there's a hole in the ductwork and it's just a small crack, just using just using mastic won't work, and gob it in there and fill the hole. However, if you have severe cracks and you want to apply either butyl tape or mesh, either one will work as long as it's clean. Apply butyl tape or mesh over the opening, and we want to push with a lot of pressure, especially with the butyl tape. Make sure that you push it and get very good contact between that butyl tape and the metal duct. And mesh should be the same way. And where the mesh or the butyl tape reaches up and hits the wood floor, we want to use a staple gun and staple it there. Okay? Now, once we apply the mastic, if we used mesh or butyl tape, we want to put the mastic on a manner that it covers the seams and the edges so that you don't know where the mastic and the butyl tape begin and end. You should not be able to see where a seam was. There should be that much mastic on it. Don't get cheap on the mastic. Once again, you're the last people that are ever going to seal that ductwork. So just remember, repair, clean, apply and use pressure, staple, and then put mastic over the seams and edges.
Yeah, so, and I can actually bring, kind of walk through what I'm going to do. So,
Okay.
first things first, I'm going to take out my, let's see, where'd that meter go? I'm going to take out my flashlight and mirror, which is right here. This is just called mirroring. So I'm going to look this way, I'm going to look this way, just to see if there's any really obvious holes or punctures, to kind of see what's what. So
Okay.
first we'll look this way. Looks pretty good, actually. It's fine. Then we'll look the other way. Now see, I can see here there's a slight hole here, but someone's patched it. I'm not going to worry too much about that. Bit of mastic, bit of silver tape. But then I can see right here, which is how obvious it is on camera. You can see right here, there's a hole in that corner, so that needs to be taken care of. And then smaller hole right there. Overall in pretty good shape. This is not a bad heat duct. Biggest thing, this is called the boot right here on the top here.
Okay.
That's not in very good shape. You can see the belly. I can actually put my whole finger in there. I'll bring the light over. You can see. So I'm going to take the silver tape here. Sometimes its official name is butyl tape. We just call it silver tape. I'm going to tape all the way around here. We'll tape up this hole, and then we'll use what's called mastic. It's kind of like a cement. we'll
Okay.
hook that on, seal it up. So
Okay.
let's do that. On the bottom is, here's where the mirror is really nice because you can really see what you're doing. Because otherwise,
Okay.
you know, I mean, you couldn't without this. You can see there's a huge gap there. You can see on this corner, top there is in pretty bad shape. Keep piecing that in. Some of them, we've had to actually rebuild the boot, and we actually have aluminum on the truck, like aluminum roll, almost like valley tin.
Okay.
And we bend that into place and put it back in, and that's what we do, like if the boot is really in a bad way. But this one's not too bad, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Biggest thing is, you know, plenty of tape, plenty of mastic. And I usually like to go about somewhere between like 1/8 and 1/4 over onto the floor.
Okay.
To really get that nice and sealed up like that. And then I'll work my way down once I go all the way around. And that will kind of help to just make a nice, good seal over top of everything.
I gotta go out and fix the water heater door, and then I have to figure out that window, the front window. I have to figure out how to.
And then on this far side here, you can see, I was pointing this out earlier, that there's pretty heavy damage there. So we'll kind of just seal in. Thankfully, these heat ducts, they're fairly clean, so the tape's sticking well, and the mastic should stick well. Sometimes if they are bad, you gotta wipe them down, at least with like a paper towel or something, because that can be a issue otherwise. But these are pretty good. Alright, so now taping's done. So what I always like to do then, I like to take my mirror and just look around, make sure I didn't miss anything, make sure there's like no holes or cracks that are hiding out that I missed the first time.
Okay.
So look around here. That looks fine. Look around this way. That looks good. And, you know, big tip here, you always want to start from the bottom, work your way to the top, otherwise you get an armful of mastic, which is not fun. So, got my sleeve here a bit. And I mean, this is the quickest part, honestly. Not a big deal to do this. Just slide it down.
So wherever you put the tape, you have to cover it up.
Yep, cover the tape, make sure there's nothing metallic showing, you know, make sure that it's up a little bit. Alright, and that is how you do a heat duct.
All right, this should end our discussion on innovative techniques and measures in mobile homes. But I just wanted to mention this in closing. This is just a teaser presentation. It's not meant to be a complete training. We just don't have time to get into all the small techniques used to make some of these procedures work. We just don't have that much time, and we are not in the field. When trying these, if you don't get additional training, expect some of them you're going to struggle through because of the small techniques that are used to make them work. So seek additional training on some of these. These techniques and procedures have been proven to work in the field. You know, when trained crews have used them and have the right training, the right tools, the right equipment, they will work. With that, good luck in the future. If you have any questions on the video or the presentation, don't be afraid to give me a call. I can't put my phone number up here, but you can contact Bruce Hagan at the State of North Dakota Weatherization Program, and he will give you my phone number. Good luck.